Help is just a click away with Shoreside Therapy's free 15-minute consultation. At Shoreside Therapies, they offer personalized therapy services that combine evidence-based techniques with genuine care and understanding. They provide various solutions to make the therapy process more accessible, including virtual appointments and assistance with insurance benefits. Their team of licensed therapists is dedicated to helping you build resilience and confidence while navigating life's challenges. Join Shoreside Therapies on your journey to finding inner peace and happiness. Go to shoresidetherapies.com for a free 15-minute consultation and discover the benefits of counseling. At Shoreside Therapies, again, shoresidetherapies.com, and schedule your free consultation right online. Welcome to the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. I'm Lori Groh, your host, mental health therapist, and practice owner. Each month, we'll showcase a central theme and provide weekly practical hacks, inspiring interviews, and valuable advice from wellness professionals. Our aim is to help you streamline your wellness and mental health journey. So let's start the show. Hi, welcome to the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. I am your host, Lori Groh. Today we have Megan Anderson. She is the founder of Therapist and a Couch, a private practice located near Milwaukee's Lower East Side. She considers herself a generalist, enjoys working with adults and adolescents, experiencing all sorts of concerns. Megan is passionate about approaching therapy from an existential and humanistic perspective. She understands that life is messy and painful for all of us. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so glad to talk with you today, and I love that we are not that far from each other.
Are we not?
No. Yeah, we have a place on Prospect Avenue, so it's pretty close.
That is so right. See, it's like those moments where I look at a map and I understand that we're close, but I will so confess that since moving to Milwaukee years ago, I've never bothered to look street names. So when people say street, I'm just like, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yes, I will just blankly nod when anyone starts talking about directions. And my husband's like, she doesn't know what you're saying right now. He's actually coined a disorder for me, spatial map dysphoria disorder. I think it's something like that.
I love that.
One of his favorite stories is we moved to Waukesha maybe about 10 years ago. And this is no joke. I called him on my way home from the office and said, where do we live again? I had no concept of where we live. Our address, I probably knew it, but I was like, wow, I actually don't know how to get to our new house.
I remember in Madison, for like my first year living there, I thought that the two lakes that you're sandwiched between were indicators of east and west, and then learned it was no, your indicator of north and south. And I was like, wow, my sense of spatial awareness is just not there.
Mine either. So we are not alone.
We're close physically together in our practice, and we're also not in our map disorder.
Yes. And who knows? Maybe we're not even close by each other. It's possible because we wouldn't know.
We're just nodding and saying
yeah. So Megan, could you share a little bit to start us out with why you do what you do and how you became a therapist? I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah. So I think the story of why I became a therapist is maybe the tale that is as old as time, which is like most of us, I became a therapist because I saw a therapist. And I think that if you have an experience in that space that just feels really meaningful and positive, it just propels a lot of us, myself included, into getting into the field. Plus, it's something that I always find really interesting. It scratches the extrovert itch in me, and it just fills up a lot of my cups in that way.
Yeah, it is definitely a profession where the day is never the same, right? Every day is different. You do not know what your day will be like or what will be talked about.
Well, people bring curveball all the time. Variety is our expertise. It's interesting. Like I think about once I was in school and then once I got out of graduate school, I was working in the hospital setting. So I was working with people who were in crisis or going through really persistent mental health concerns. I really love that work, it was really fulfilling, and it absolutely helped me feel like I was showing up for people and giving back the way that I wanted to. I think that those experiences while I stayed in the hospital, I did that in Madison and Milwaukee. I think that also really informed me in terms of the type of therapist I wanted to become. I was seeing a lot of coping strategies, quick fixes, and I just couldn't help but think about, I think we need to slow way down here. And I think there's a lot of room for trying to understand and better appreciate what we're going through before we jump into this strategizing, problem solving space. And so I think that guided me out of the hospital realm and into private practice a little bit. And lo and behold, I'm here now.
I couldn't agree with you more as far as that idea of the quick fix. We are built that way. We want our problems to go away or a negative feeling to go away right away. And it's so understandable, but at the same time, we'll tend to be doing those same exact things and be in the same exact spot until you back up a little bit further and say, okay, where is this all coming from? Where's the start of this? What's the root cause? You don't really make the long-term changes or the movement that you might really, truly want to make. Can you tell me a little bit more then? If somebody calls you, what could they expect?
If people were to call and say, hey, I'm looking to start therapy, I think one thing that I fess up to is I might not seem like some of the other therapists out there right now. Like I'm trying to move a little bit away from some of the third wave stuff and not in its entirety. I think that there's room for us to talk about practicalities and problem solve for sure. But I try to remind people that I'm really going to try to help us slow down. I want you to notice what's going on for you. I want to help deeply know you, help you deeply know yourself and what you're noticing and experiencing. And I really want to start there and even start about what's happening between you and I in session, because I think there's so much that we're not listening to that can really give us a lot of guidance when we try to do something different.
I could see that as maybe not what somebody's first thinking about why they want to come to therapy. Some people do. Some people are like, I need to really start to know myself better. When somebody that's in that space of wanting that, then that can be somewhat of an easy next step, right? Because then they're ready to go, ready to start focusing in on that. But yes, for a lot of us, it's maybe not our first instinct to go a little bit further back or go towards ourselves.
That's a really nice way of putting it. I think I am caught clients off guard in session at times when I try to move us in that direction. And you can get that felt sense of like, why are you asking me about this? And it's just that sense of there's something really happening here that we need to pay attention to if you want to pay attention to it. And so that's sometimes the invitation that I extend to people is, can we try to slow down here? And can we check it out and see what's there?
Because, and I like that permission piece. It needs to be that, but also it's not a question people are really used to being asked. It's rare that we give each other in a day-to-day basis that time and attention and really that focus of, hey, actually what you think and what you feel really matters to you, it matters to me, and it's going to matter to everybody around you.
That process of moving inward, I think, is just so important. And I don't know, I can probably go on a tangent here of talking about maybe how that's a downfall of social media. We're just way more inclined to look outward these days.
Yeah, I do think there's truth to that. I think, I'm going off in a tangent now too, but that our world has evolved in such big, huge ways, right? And we got away from nature. That's the number one thing, right? As we started to build more and more and more, we are now separate. And now I think our next more frightening stage, maybe it's equally as frightening, is our disconnection with ourselves. And we are not necessarily caring about ourselves now either. We aren't caring about, I don't want to say we all aren't caring about the world and our environment, but we're detaching from it. And we're in a process right now, I think, of detaching from our needs and wants. I can see it happening to myself. I can see it happening to my family members. I can see all of that. I'm actually not going to go to the bathroom right now because I want to finish this video.
That's a good example.
Yes. It's that does happen. And it really is, because that's really inviting, right? We get a lot of positive feelings from it. And we're not getting that same positive feeling probably to focus inward right now. But when you start to do it, things start changing and some of those positive things start to develop.
Absolutely stand behind that.
So going into the intuition piece, I'd like to hear a little bit on your take on what intuition means and your thoughts on how somebody starts to get in tune with that. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll just self-disclose here that I am a naturally anxious being. I lean that way. And I think one of the really interesting pieces when we're starting to take into consider intuition is, how is intuition different from fear? How is it different from instinct? How is it different from impulsivity? And so I really think that intuition, in my perspective, is a sense of like deep knowing. Like we think of those phrases of, I felt it in my gut. And there's just a clarity there, and maybe a calmness, a groundedness, perhaps even a sense of wisdom that exists there. That feels so radically different to me than like when I'm anxious and anticipating what is to come or what could come. That's really restless. It's super uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. And so I start to think about that as the difference.
Our center self is, you know it when you're there, right? I think that's the thing, is you do start to recognize that. And the more that we're going closer to it and connecting with it, the more we're going to notice it. And that anxiety piece, I relate to that. It's what's next, and that sort of high energy spot. If we're in that state all the time, we're missing actually what our kind of more of our map is trying to tell us.
Right.
Maybe you're going in this direction and that's not needed, but kept me busy for an hour.
Totally. It makes me think of that sense of embodiment. Like when you really focus in on how these experiences fit in our body, intuition feels so different to me, and I think to you, to a lot of us, than anxiety feels.
I hear this sometimes from clients, and I'm curious on your take on it. When somebody says, I'm trying to listen to my intuition, I'm trying to listen to my gut, but I can't really tell which is which. Is this a knee jerk? I know you laid it out for what intuition is, but what if somebody's very confused on that?
I think that's a great question. And I landed on two questions that I find myself either thinking about, or questions that I like to ask clients too, that I feel are really applicable here, which is, when I'm in this place, what am I genuinely noticing? And I think if we ask ourselves, what am I noticing? And what shows up is, wow, my body feels really settled right now. Things feel really quiet. To me, that sounds like it's maybe coming from a thoughtful, knowing sort of place that a knee-jerk reaction might not always lend up. But I don't think that we can totally rule out knee-jerk reactions as never being intuition. I do think that at times there are these split-second sort of pieces, and maybe that's a little bit more instinct, who knows, where we have a knee-jerk reaction, and it is our intuition telling us thing. I think about the other day, I had this sort of terrifying experience of driving home from the grocery store when I witnessed this like very unsettling encounter in the parking lot. And like, I just felt in my gut, I was like, something doesn't feel right about this. And I felt a little nervous about my safety, essentially. And I was driving away, and my fear, maybe it was actually my gut, because I don't think it was just anxiety. No, if it was totally pure instinct, was like, I just have this sense that this guy saw me, see what was happening, and he's going to follow me. And sure enough, he did. It felt pretty quick. I was pretty confident.
That's a bit of that distinction of the wavering feeling. Because we've questioned ourselves so much along our life, we'll question sometimes what's the truth or our direction. And so that can be very confusing for people too, of like, how do I really trust that? If there are a lot of different questions coming at you, then that could be in that anxiety place, but
Yeah.
also it could be trusting intuition. And so
Right.
that's probably something that we got to figure out with somebody. How can they tell what is actually driving my direction? Oh, this seems right. This seems like the right spot for me. Or is it people told me this millions of times? That's not going to make sense. Or I need to be doing this.
I think that's a really wonderful way of putting it. And I think it's this process, I think what we're landing on is us not only knowing ourselves, but also then trusting ourselves when we know something, even if we don't know how we know it. Yeah.
Yes, it's like a skill like everything else. It gets better as you're practicing it.
Yeah. And I think the
So,
kicker
yeah.
sometimes there too is just there's discomfort that comes from our intuition at times. And I think that plays a role. A lot of us, probably all of us, aren't geared towards embracing discomfort. And so I think sometimes the interpretations that we take from that discomfort can lead us away from our intuition, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that happens quite often. It can be for sure uncomfortable to lean into that.
Yeah.
And when somebody will come in maybe talking about a decision that they have to make, some pretty big one, whether to stay in a relationship or not, is that acknowledgement of, I do know that this makes sense for me, but there's so much other stuff going on. There's so much
Yeah.
other things that really direct somebody away from that. And that can be its own struggle too of, I know what I need to be doing, but I got all these things going on inside of me saying that I should be doing something different, or making a change is going to be too hard.
Yeah.
Or too stressful or too painful,
Scary, lonely.
which is why
Right.
a lot of times people call us up, is like, help me know what I know.
And then figure out the roadmap. Right.
I'm also very curious about an individual that might be having mental health concerns, might be struggling a bit, might show up a bit at work, might show up at home. How would using intuition help somebody that might be having some difficulties?
Yeah. So when I think intuition, it comes back to this piece of what am I noticing? Taking the content of our struggle. Where Joe Schmo is constantly gossiping and my boss is this and my boss is doing that. Just thinking about like those literal problems and the content of them. And I'd really want to know for our clients or for whoever it is that's struggling, when this is happening, how are you experiencing it? Can we think about how it feels, how it sits with you? And once you sort of land on that, what do you want to do with that information? Because your body's telling you something that's probably really important. And I think that's the moment when it can provoke in a good way our sense of problem solving, our sense of agency. Like all of a sudden, I think choices can come to us. I know when we're really struggling, oftentimes it can feel really hopeless or helpless and like we don't have choices or places to turn to. But I just can't help but wonder for a second if we slow down and think about how am I experiencing all of this? If there isn't something really fruitful there that can actually help us problem solve and not feel so helpless.
And let's say like that boss is asking them to do way more than they need to be doing, and they're feeling burnt out and stressed and overwhelmed. Let's say that person's coming into your office and you're asking that question, right? What's actually showing up for you when your boss says, here's another thing you need to be doing? What tends to come up for people? What do people notice?
We hear the internal dialogue play out in our sessions with clients in these positions. Of, I really wish I could tell my boss this. I think it's more so in those moments that's coming from a core part of you that really wishes they could say it. Your gut's telling you something. Something needs to change. I need to advocate for myself. And I just wish we could listen to those moments and be with them and then think about what we can do with them.
That idea, you're so right. Usually a client will say, if they're having a struggle with their boss, a lot of times it's feeling like they can't speak. Basically, they want to say the truth of what's happening, the truth of their experience, And typically that's not how that works, right? When
No.
you're talking to somebody that's above you in level, you can't just go off the handle and say, you're the worst and blah, 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 all of those things. You
Right.
can't. And so at the same time, figuring out this is a real emotion. Your body is telling you something important to listen to it and come up with some options. First, you have to know what it's trying to say, right? And what you're actually feeling, because otherwise you'll go in the totally wrong direction. And there are ways to say something without necessarily being obstinate or yelling.
Totally.
A lot of times people don't realize they can do some form of that.
Yes. I think often in those moments, what's so unfortunate is we start to feel powered and, hey, I really have no agency, control, or again, choice here. And I'm imagining that we start to say that over and over again to ourselves, whether we're aware of it or not. And these people show up. We talk about it in session. We talk about it in coffee shops with our friends. We rant over text messages, whatever it is. And here we are saying the things that are really true to us and yet doing nothing about it because it feels like we can't.
Yeah. And how hard that can be for somebody. It starts to chip away at ourselves, especially if you're working like that typical 9 to 5, right? Like the 1/3 of our life in a situation where we feel like that.
It's really hard. It's upsetting to think about, I think, if we're working in a place where that's how I'm spending most of my time.
Megan, going back into that idea of not the quick fix.
Yeah.
And you have some of those questions. You ask people, what is it feeling like? What's going on for you? That next part, how does that exploring part go? Let's take this example, right? So this particular fake client we're calling Joe Schmo. So they come in and they start to say, yeah, I guess I just don't know what I want to do here.
Mm-hmm.
What happened then when they're in that space of, I know I'm feeling all this stuff. What am I supposed to do with it? And then usually a list of, I got to pay my bills. I'm stuck.
Right.
What happens next?
Right. I really just want to put my 2-week notice on that person's desk right now and fly off some remote island.
Yes.
Sometimes I invite people to like, just wave a magic wand here for a second.
Yeah.
Like, how would you handle this if we weren't so stuck in the thing, I can't do this, or this will go really badly? If we really put some of the limitations off of the table for a second, even if it's not realistic, can we just imagine what we would do and how we would handle this? Ridiculously fruitful stuff comes from that.
100%. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Let's open up the possibilities. Let's take away some of the limitations. And you are just painting your own picture of what actually could happen. Yeah, I think you do. You start to see what you really want. And even if you're not moving to Puerto Rico or on a cruise forever, there still can be some things you can find from that information. Oh,
right.
Here's a desire to escape. There's something in that. And even talking a bit about what that looks like for that person, maybe even where that came from. Somebody that might be in that space of, I want to quit, I'm out of here, and almost having that fantasy in a day-to-day of, oh, I would feel so much relief and I want to do that and I just need to leave. And there's something that happens in that experience that also seems to keep somebody stuck in that. There's some emotional relief. I'm escaping. Oh, but now I'm here again today.
Doing the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like those fantasies and those daydreams, they are just like chock full of really lovely information. And I think too, and I've been asked to do this in my own therapy before, and I find it really helpful when someone says, again, let's take these limitations off of the table. Don't worry about realism right now. Come up with 5 solutions for this problem. And again, we really don't think about how it's not going to work or reasons why X, Y, and Z won't go well. Just put some stuff on a piece of paper or throw some paint on a wall. It gets us to be creative, which is what we need to do in those moments, especially when our intuition's telling us something so clear.
Yeah, you're right. Like that creative energy can't really be there if there's a part of us or somebody else that's saying, oh no, you can't do that one,
Yeah,
can't do that
right.
one, can't do that one. If that is put aside, you'll keep going a little bit further. Because if we come up with 3 solutions and we have our automatic responses to those, why would we go to a 4th solution or a 5th one? It's a waste of our time and energy.
Yeah, we laugh. And at its worst, I think we deprive ourselves of maybe a very real solution. What I wish I could share with people is resistance is also, once again, telling us something really freaking important. Just like intuition, just like those off the wall, creative, unrealistic solutions, I think resistance is also telling us something important. That resistance is doing something protective, or at least it once was, and it's probably just getting in our way now.
That makes so much sense to go into that resistance,
Yeah.
right? To say that the pattern is continuing and you're saying you're not happy and this is why. And there's also a lot of reasons why you don't want to make those changes. And going into those a bit more when, right, like it tends to be some old storyline or a fear or something that they need, right? And a lot of times I think it just, no, everything's going to be okay. Oh,
Yeah. You have the ability and the capacity to do this.
yeah. And going through what are those things popping up? And
Yeah.
what if those were removed? What does that feel like?
We probably experience all the time when we're in therapy with clients is we hear the worst case scenario. And I love working with clients through worst case scenarios. Those are also really vital in terms of information. But we never, or maybe not often, think about how can I handle that well. On the other side, what's the best thing that could happen here? Can I step into and let myself even just imagine and daydream, wow, I showed up at work today. I told my boss, these are the things that aren't working for me anymore. I need help around X, Y, and Z, or I might really have to start considering if this job isn't a good fit for me anymore. And seeing yourself do that thing of listening to your intuition and following it through. Can you also give yourself a chance?
Yeah. Or to tell your boss to go shove it.
Right. Because sometimes that's warranted.
Yes. But I think that's so true. Kind of going back to that idea of what is it feeling like if you did that? Like just put yourself there for a moment. Does it feel scary? Because it could. Or does it feel a different way?
Yeah. Or the, I'm so glad I did that. I think that's a feeling that gives me chills even just saying it. Of how lovely is it when we have those moments of, wow, I did quote unquote right thing there. The other anecdote that readily came to my mind as I was thinking about intuition, which was one of my favorite stories of me noticing my intuition and following through on it, is probably when I landed on a college decision. Like you go through all of this stress, there's all these expectations that different people have of you. And you have to stay really true to yourself in those moments. And you also have to stay true to yourself, even despite some of your own fears you might have, like, I don't know, moving across the country. Not that I did that, but it just makes me think of my decision around college. And it was just like a crystal clear moment to me when I was on a campus tour. And it was like, I just feel it. I feel it.
Yes, that was like my experience too. I felt it. And it was a hard thing to really put into words at that time, but that's a great example of how you do have to put yourself first in that particular decision because you're on your own for that. You're the only one going to that place. You're the only one
living out those 4 or 5 years.
So if it's, oh, I want to go there because that's where everybody's going, right? Can see the draw to that, but
yeah. Your intuition might not like you.
Or it might be too fun of a school and then you might not, do as good as you want. I'm curious, Megan, if there's any takeaway or something for our listeners to reflect on, to think about.
Yeah. Can we really start to prioritize turning inward? Can we really start asking ourselves, like, how aware am I of what's going on for me? Even in the day-to-day, it doesn't have to be around a major decision. Can we just start practicing awareness? Because that's what we need to do in order to know ourselves. And not to mention, I think some of the more scientific understandings of intuition is it's these really split second decisions that our body makes for us based off of experiences and knowledge that we have, we've got to be paying attention in order to get that experience and not. And we start paying attention.
Oh, that's such a good point, right? You got to do that in order to keep connecting and making that intuition stronger, right? It's our self-knowledge. Yeah, if we're not paying attention, how would we know what anything's telling us? We wouldn't notice. Yeah.
We wouldn't notice.
Awesome. Megan, could you share for anybody that would want to reach out to you, connect to you, could you share how they would be able to best do that?
Yeah, so I think one of the easiest places to go and where you can probably find all the ways to connect with me in one nutshell would probably even just be going to my website, which is www.com. And by all means, people are welcome to send me an email or fill out a contact form on my website. And I keep my eyes pretty peeled on my inbox, so that's good for me. Who knows? But that would definitely be the best way to contact me.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. And I'll put that information in the show notes. It was so nice.
Great. Thank you so much, Lori.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you for joining us today on the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. Remember, your well-being is a priority, and we're here to help support you every step of the way. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring content on health and wellness. You can also join our Facebook group to connect with Wisconsin wellness providers by clicking the link in our show notes. Take care of yourself and remember that your well-being is a journey, not a destination. We look forward to you joining us again next time on the Wisconsin Wellness Podcast. Until then, stay well and stay inspired.